in the population as a whole. It's a little bit difficult to quantify because many of them do not like to self-identify if they fill out forms because they don't want to be identified as Arabs. So they'll check white or they'll check other. But the guesstimates are that there are several thousand. It's really quite a large and isolated community. Yeah. And you see them around, you know, pushing their children, shopping, and so forth. So they went from being absolutely terrified to come out of their apartments. In fact, they tell me, "Oh, teacher, we just sit in our apartment, we look out the window and we cry." Oh, God. And they went from that to being able to come down to the community room for a legitimate purpose, you know, to learn English. And now that I've been doing this for 3 years, I've had, you know, quite a transition. And some other students, say from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, that have a little bit higher education levels than the women from Yemen. And they've been able to bring the, you know, the performance and progress up. And what is most gratifying to me is that I've had no fewer than, I think, maybe 12 or 14 students make the transition from the community room to City College. And this is amazing because they have said we would never have the courage to go to City College if we didn't have this program. They have very little experience as students. Traditionally, they leave school at fourth, fifth, or sixth grade. It's not something that's rewarded, you know, in their culture. And for them to, you know, to actually carry a book around and to be able to converse and have the courage to go out, take public transportation, is really quite astonishing. And so I view what I do as sort of a bridge, you know, a bridge to City College, a bridge to citizenship, a bridge to the outer world. And should I share this story?
Tell the story about the Arabic interpreters.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, again, as I make up all my own materials, many things I have to do on the fly. And I had noticed that they were, because I understand Arabic, I understood that they were really developing some very negative stereotypes of African Americans. So, of course, since none of them, or very few of them, are citizens, they really didn't know about the history of, you know, the civil rights movement and slavery in this country. So I developed a series of lessons to show them this, and then they were able to apply this to themselves. Oh yeah, somebody pulls out my hijab, says, "There, go back to your country." And at the end of the series of lessons, I said, you know, if you want something in this country, you have to fight for it. You know, it's not going to be given to you. So unbeknownst to me, they met among themselves and decided what they really needed in the school, in the Tenderloin School, was Arabic interpreters. There were interpreters for, you know, Chinese, Spanish, Vietnamese, but no Arabic interpreters. So they took it upon themselves to call their supervisor, you know, in their district, and make an appointment to go see this man and ask for something. So this is totally an anomaly. They called someone, a man who was not in their family, spoke in English. They went with their children, sat in front of a man who was not in their family, and asked for something. And they got it. Wow. So and then when they came back, I found out about this. You know, I told them in class. I said I was so proud of them, you know, for taking this initiative, for doing this. And one of them stood up and said, "Teacher, we are strong because you are with us." So that's really the trajectory that I find really rewarding, but that's also really necessary for them to be able to actually have the confidence and courage to come to City College.
So on an institutional level, I feel like we need to find more Christine Cordaros, because I don't believe she's the only one in the city who is tapping into these untapped populations who, you know, and she serves as a bridge. So if we're connecting with people like Christine, then we're also connecting to these unserved populations. Neela, you mentioned that you've also seen a dramatic shift in the student population, and it happened all of a sudden. And you said that you had to take a hard look at your preconceptions about who your students are. Can you talk about what you've seen and what you've done to change?
So I used to teach a group of these students, we're hoping to inspire these students, giving them knowledge base to go into the credit world. And we were doing the CASAs, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with CASAs. And they're having these are really high-level students. So we're talking about probably 7 to 15, if there was such a thing, right? It's very advanced, high-level students. And they're really having a hard time filling out the number of years of education they have. And so then I said, no, in your country, and when I went and looked at their education, I noticed one day that they all had, majority of them, I would say about 60% had BAs and had higher degrees beyond that. So it went from Neela-centered teaching to, what do you want from this class? Because all of a sudden, I wanted to know who these people were. Like, I just didn't realize that that's who I was teaching. So there was this one Russian woman, and she said, well, I was a doctor in the Ukraine, and I said, so why don't you want to be a doctor in America? And she said, oh, it's too much paperwork. So her concept of what a doctor is in the Ukraine, which is more like an administrator, and the practice of being a doctor in America is very different. So nobody had asked her, like, why don't you extend your knowledge and, get another degree in the medical field, in the health field, do something different. You don't have to give up that degree. But she didn't know that she could do that. She didn't know our transfer process. She didn't know how to get those units counted towards yet another degree. So that started a conversation with other students from the Middle East who were nurses, and so had this whole an environment of, I would say, a classroom filled with students who had previous jobs and very educated, and they're taking level 7, 8 English and don't know what to do with it. Right? They're just sitting there, and it didn't dawn on me. Of course, you're taught, and when you're taking, you're doing your master's, learn about your population, learn about, who they are, what they need, and yes, and I've been teaching for a really long time. I have something like 15 years of education experience, whether it's technology, museums, or, colleges. You sort of get in the classroom and you stop doing those things. You stop asking who your students are. And even if they tell you who they are, you stop asking. You sort of get into your mode, especially if you're a teacher who's moving from teaching one class to another, another. You just forget that practice. You're like, okay, I'm in another class now. Okay, now I learn this totally new. Okay, teach it, right? So so learning that, I changed the way that I started approaching them. I started giving them more information about how they could, go to credit, and then I started seeing them in credit, which was wonderful. And I told them, okay, there's all these different kinds of classes you can take, and then we started doing lesson plans where they could, have what City College has to offer, where could they fit in, what kind of English did they need, to be able to do the kind of work that they want to do, just to inspire them and say, maybe you're not going to do this semester. Maybe you're not going to do this a year from now, but maybe you'll do it in a year and a half from now, right? So it's just putting it in their minds. And so today, this semester, I'm teaching a class called ESL for Automated Office Environment. You probably know what that means, right? So it's one of we have lots of these courses. Basically, but what they're saying is how do you train if you work in an office environment where everything is digital, and how do you negotiate in that environment? So I found myself, I have very young students, they're 20s and 30s, that mid-range. And they all have their cell phones, and they actually have a lot of job experience, except they do not know how to negotiate the American technology market. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know they know all these words, but they don't know how to use it in the way that they can get jobs. So this class it's a 1 hour class, and every day I teach like a workshop. You know, you're gonna learn this task, emailing, doing a search. How do you do a search? Multiple ways to do a search. And then I put people together, and I said, you're gonna learn the concept of collaboration, because that's important. You have to know that word, you have to know what it means, right? So I have to create an environment where they're ready to learn. They're scared to say the word collaboration, but they're gonna do it and eventually learn it, right? How to be proactive. What does that mean in an office environment? We're taught all of these things. They need to learn it. How do you get that information to them? So it's really about finding out who your students are and how much do they want as Americans to define entry as, right? And how do you learn that word entry? How do you learn enough American culture to fit into that world and then come back and get your degree? Because obviously, I don't need you to support me. I want you to have a career. You know, and if you decide that you have a career, you're going to be at City College. The classes are going to be filled, and we're all going to be happy. You're going to make that money that I know. You know, yeah, these students are very different. They're coming in with high motivation, but they do not know how to negotiate in this culture. So that's a big part of teaching them. You know, how do you survive here? How do you survive?
Yeah, thank you, Neela. So, Julia, in our interview, you talked about the dramatic shift intensive English programs, or IEPs, all over the country are seeing in the students entering these programs. You also mentioned taking advantage of technology in the social medias, for example, using crowdsourcing in the classroom for building community. And also quoted students as commenting, "I'm not going to volunteer to answer or write on the board, but I want to be called on regularly to do so." Can you talk about what you see as changing student expectations?
So in most IEPs, I would say, around the country, I'm going to just use the ALI as one example. It's not the same everywhere, but there are general trends that you will see. Our student population is generally young, 18 to 25. They usually have bachelor's degrees, or they're looking for bachelor's degrees. So they want to attend university in the United States to either get an undergraduate or a graduate degree. They are tech savvy. They are really concerned about the TOEFL test, because that's what they need to get into university. And the shift we've seen is in country of origin. So just 3 years ago when I started at the ALI, most of my students were from China. This semester we have, out of our entire institution, we have, it's 20% Japanese students, 25% Chinese, and 40% from Saudi Arabia. So it's been a huge shift in terms of just where the dominant population in our institution is from. Mostly men, but we do have Saudi women as well. So this affects everything from how students place. They come in with different skills, with different levels, with different approaches to learning, with different ideas of what it means to be a student. And classroom management changes drastically when your student population changes that drastically. So when I started, I had to really practice coaxing students to say things, ask, you know, it doesn't matter if it's not right, just try it. And now I'm doing a lot of this, and doing a lot more accuracy-focused work and fluency-focused work. And I'm also doing a lot more management in terms of like directing traffic, who are the dominant students and who needs to help get a little bit more help to get some time to speak in the classroom. So my teaching has to change in order to serve everyone in my class, not just this one dominant student population, but the other people that are in my class as well. Leah mentioned crowdsourcing. So this is the difference between technology 1.0 to technology 2.0, right? Technology 1.0 means you're downloading stuff, you're reading, you're consuming information. Technology 2.0 is you're uploading things, you're creating content. And my students are very, very familiar with this. They're all on Facebook, they're all on Twitter, they're all doing things to communicate with family back home. And they kind of expect to be able to contribute to what's going on in the classroom and